So this is the month of August, and this month our theme is respect for all nations and peoples. And I want to draw your attention to the Frost family's altar over here because it's a series of masks from different nations and representations of different religions all together up here. And also some other masks that might represent different cultures, different celebrations, different costumes, and that kind of thing. So they've done a beautiful job. I invite you to take a look at that after the service this morning. When we're talking about respect for other nations and peoples, sometimes even when we want to be very connected and available and open-minded, we have certain assumptions that get us into trouble. I talked about that a little bit last week. This is one of those situations. A local business was looking for office help. They put a sign in the window saying, "Help wanted, must be able to type, must be good with a computer, and must be bilingual. We are an equal opportunity employer." So, a short time afterwards, a golden retriever dog trotted up to the window, saw the sign, and went inside. And he looked at the receptionist and wagged his tail, and then walked over to the sign and looked at it and whined. Getting the idea, the receptionist went to the office manager, and the office manager came out and was surprised to see the dog, to say the least. However, the dog looked determined. So he let him into the office, and inside the dog jumped up on a chair and stared at the manager. The manager said, "I can't hire you. The sign says you have to be able to type." Well, the dog jumped down, went to the typewriter, proceeded to type out a perfect letter, took out the page, trotted over to the manager, gave it to him, and jumped back on the chair. Well, the manager was stunned, but he told the dog, "The sign says you have to be good with a computer." So the dog jumped down again, went over to the computer, proceeded to demonstrate his expertise with various programs, produced a sample spreadsheet and a database, and presented them to the manager. Well, by this time, the man was totally dumbfounded. He looked at the dog and he said, "I realize that you are a very intelligent dog and you have some interesting, unusual abilities. However, I still can't give you the job." And the dog jumped down, went over to a copy of the sign, and put his paw on the part about being an equal opportunity employer. And the manager said, "Yes, but the sign also says you have to be bilingual." And without blinking, the dog looked him in the face and said, "Meow." Sometimes we make assumptions about what people are capable of, even when we think we're being open-minded. And so this morning, my topic is that understanding is not equal to approval, that charity is not equal to empowerment, and tolerance is not equal to inclusion. I changed that last word. It says respect in your program, but I wanted to go further than just respect, so I shifted it to inclusion. What happens when we focus on those is that they are simply not enough. So understanding, actually, Werner Erhard said once that understanding is the booby prize. Understanding somebody else is not the same as knowing them or making space for them. And sometimes understanding comes from a sort of self-righteousness where we think we know, but we don't really know. So we think we understand. I was watching a show last night where somebody who's a therapist said to somebody who was going through a difficult time, "I know exactly what you're feeling." And I thought, no, you don't. You know, no matter how much experience you have, you don't know exactly what that experience is for the other person. Are you with me here? Yeah? And also, charity becomes a kind of benevolent pity, or it certainly can. It's the kind of thing that you are in control of. You can give it, you can withdraw it. The control is all in the hands of the person being charitable. And tolerance, Ram Dass referred to this once as being professionally warm. It is the appearance of being warm, but it still is withdrawn or held back. There's some distance there. And so professionally warm is sort of like what we do when we have compassion fatigue. And, we just don't feel like we can give anymore, but we want to appear as if we're there and we're present and we're listening and we're caring, even though we feel worn out. But we can also do this just by this idea of being tolerant. You know, my mother used to refer to that as putting up with somebody. That's not really a particularly welcoming thing, to be tolerant, it seems to me. I believe we want in our culture for tolerance to mean more than that, but it often just shows up as putting up with somebody. And so in all of these cases, with understanding, with charity, that kind of benevolent pity, and with tolerance, putting up with somebody, the power always resides outside the receiver. It's always held in the giver's control. And that isn't really an exchange or a communication or a receptivity between people who are equal. Would you agree? So we're making assumptions sometimes that can get us into trouble or difficulty. One assumption that we can make is that, oh yes, I love this. Jesus didn't say, my command unto you is tolerate one another as I have tolerated you. That is not what he said. It was love one another. Well, that's a much more powerful command than put up with each other, because I've put up with you. And believe me, it wasn't easy. So when we're dealing with certain assumptions, I came across this study by a gentleman who has written a book called The Lucifer Effect. Now, Lucifer was one of God's angels who became kind of power hungry and fell from grace and became the devil. So he went from Lucifer to Satan. And this man was talking about how easy it is for good people to become evil. And this is one aspect of what he says. This is from a TED Talk he gave. There's a study some of you think you know about, but very few people have ever read the story. Stanley Milgram asked the question, could the Holocaust happen here, now? People say, no, that's Nazi Germany, that's Hitler, that's 1939. He said, yeah, but suppose Hitler asks you, would you electrocute a stranger? Bless you. I know, shocking, right? No way, not me, I'm a good person. So he said to himself, why don't we put you in a situation and give you a chance to see what you would do? And so he advertised for and tested 1,000 ordinary people, 500 from New Haven, Connecticut, 500 from Bridgeport, and that was just the first one. He did 16 of these, I believe. And the ad said, so this is how they got people to come in. The ad said, psychologists want to understand memory. We want to improve people's memory because memory is the key to success. We're going to give you $5 for your time. So these were ordinary people, barbers, clerks, white-collar people. So they said, one of you is going to be the learner and one of you is going to be the teacher. The learner gets tied up to a shock apparatus in another room, and the other one of you is told by the authority, the guy in the lab coat, your job as the teacher is to give this guy material to learn. Gets it right, reward him. Gets it wrong, you push a button on the shock box. Now the first button is 15 volts. He doesn't even feel it. And he says, that's the key. All evil starts with 15 volts. And then the next step is another 15 volts. The problem is, at the end of the line, it's 450 volts. And as you go along, the guy is screaming, I've got a heart condition, I'm out of here. You're a good person, you complain. Sir, who's going to be responsible if something happens to him? And the experimenter says, don't worry, I'll be responsible. Continue, teacher. And the question is, who would go all the way to 450 volts? So Milgram asks 40 psychiatrists, what percent of American citizens would go all the way to the end? And they said, only 1%, because that's sadistic behavior. And psychiatry knows only 1% of Americans are actually sadistic. Here's the data. They could not be more wrong. 2/3 go all the way to 450 volts. And this was just one study. Milgram did more than 16 studies. In the study where you see somebody like you go all the way, 90% go all the way. In another study, if you see people rebel, 90% rebel. What about women? No different than men. So Milgram is quantifying evil as the willingness of people to blindly obey authority, to go all the way to 450 volts. And it's like a dial on human nature, a dial in a sense that you can make almost everybody totally obedient, down to the majority, down to none. So what are the 7 social processes that grease the slippery slope of evil? First, mindlessly taking the first small step. Second, dehumanization of others. Third, de-individuation of the self. Fourth, diffusion of personal responsibility. Fifth, blind obedience to authority. Sixth, uncritical conformity to group norms. And 7, passive tolerance to evil through inaction or indifference. Now that's kind of shocking, I think. And yet, the question then becomes, well, what if evil is real? Are these people evil people? Are there people who are just evil? Well, this book, to me, is an explanation of how evil develops, almost like the frog in the warm water. You know the story of the frog? If you take a frog and you put it in boiling water, it's going to jump out immediately. But if you take a frog and put it in a pan of lukewarm water and you warm it up very, very, very gradually, eventually you have a cooked frog. Now, I'm not sure that's actually true, but I like the metaphor in terms of how this slow, quiet, very ordinary process goes into a place that's so far beyond what anybody thinks they would do or would approve of. And so the question becomes, well, what if evil is real? If we take emotion, and we add it to our particular viewpoint, and we subtract the context that somebody else is coming from, so we just have our emotion and our viewpoint, that can lead us into a place of rejection or anger or fear or hatred. So this is an Escher piece of art. If you look at the white creatures here, you'll see angels all the way around. So these are the angels. However, if you turn this, now what you see is bat-like demons. The angels and the demons are connected to each other. They are interrelated. They depend on each other. The light and the darkness, the good and the evil, the right and the wrong, if you will. And so the understanding that emerges is that all people have the potential to be influenced in this way. Not just a few, but all of us. And therefore it becomes important that we're paying attention to what we're saying, what we're thinking, what we're doing, and what we're easing slowly toward or into when we begin to just slide down a very gradual slope. Everybody wants to belong, everybody wants to be cared about, to be approved of, to be included or empowered, but not often do we all find that we can do that for each other. And for some reason I was thinking of this song from My Fair Lady. There's a very old movie, My Fair Lady. Some of you may have seen it. But it is a story of Pygmalion, really, that's turned into a musical from George Bernard Shaw's play. And Professor Higgins is a man who believes he can teach anybody different dialects and accents, and to prove it to his friend, they go down to Covent Garden and they pick up a flower girl who's a Cockney, and they train her to sound like a princess. And over the time, she works very, 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 very hard. And they're not particularly supportive or complimentary. In fact, most of the time, they talk about her like she's not even there or can't hear them. So they finally go to this event, and everybody thinks that she's a princess from a foreign country. Her bearing, her cultured accent in English. And so when they get back to the house, Higgins and Pickering, his friend, are congratulating each other about what they have accomplished and how amazing they are. And she's there. Nobody says, you did great. Nobody says thank you, nothing. And finally, she storms off out of the house in tears. And Higgins sings this song. And I'm not going to sing it, but I'm going to read it to you. What in all of heaven could have prompted her to go after such a triumph as the ball? What could have depressed her? What could have possessed her? I cannot understand the wretch at all. Women are irrational. That's all there is to that. Their heads are full of cotton, hay, and rags. They're nothing but exasperating, irritating, vacillating, calculating, agitating, maddening, and infuriating hags. Pickering, why can't a woman be more like a man? Why can't a woman be more like a man? Men are so honest, so thoroughly square, eternally noble, historically fair, who, when you win, will always give your back a pat. Well, why can't a woman be like that? Why does everyone do what the others do? Why can't a woman learn to use her head? Why do they do everything their mothers do? Why don't they grow up, well, like their father instead? Why can't a woman take after a man? Men are so pleasant, so easy to please. Whenever you're with them, you're always at ease. Would you be slighted if I didn't speak for hours? And Pickering says, of course not. Would you be livid if I had a drink or two? Nonsense. Would you be wounded if I never sent you flowers? Never. Well, why can't a woman be like you? One man in a million may shout a bit. Now and then there's one with slight defects. One, perhaps, whose truthfulness you doubt a bit. But by and large, we are a marvelous sex. Why can't a woman take after a man? Because men are so friendly, good-natured and kind. A better companion you never will find. If I were hours late for dinner, would you bellow? Of course not. If I forgot your silly birthday, would you fuss? Nonsense. Would you complain if I took out another fellow? Never. Well, why can't a woman be like us? Why can't a woman be more like a man? Men are so decent, such regular chaps, ready to help you through any mishaps, ready to buck up whenever you're glum. Why can't a woman be a chum? Why is thinking something women never do? Why is logic never even tried? Straightening up their hair is all they ever do. Why don't they straighten up the mess that's inside? Why can't a woman behave like a man? If I was a woman who'd been to a ball, been hailed as a princess by one and by all, would I start weeping like a bathtub overflowing and carry on as if my home were in a tree? Would I run off and never tell me where I'm going? Why can't a woman be like me? So, the reason I share that is because I think that in all of our desire to understand other people and make space for them, what we really are saying underneath is, why can't you be more like me? You should be like me. You'd be happier, you'd understand more, you'd fit in better, you could, And so when we learn to pray in Centers for Spiritual Living, particularly when we learn to pray for other people, one of the dangers is that we pray for them to be changed into who we think they should be. We look at them and think, I know what you need, I know what your problem is, I know what you should want, I know how you should be, and I'm going to pray for that. But that's not what we do. There was a guy once who said to Ernest Holmes, I'm in a lawsuit. Would you pray for me? I want to win this lawsuit. And Holmes said, no, that's not how it works. He said, I will pray for the truth to be revealed in the case so clearly that it's obvious to everyone. And if you're wrong, you'll lose. You still want me to treat for you? The treatment for another person is always for their highest good. Always for their full life and development, even when we don't know, or even when we think we know what that ought to be. So everybody wants to belong. And if we include people in our belonging, sometimes that is a challenge to approve of them. We don't always understand people, and so we don't approve of how they show up or what they do. I don't know about you, but I've been challenged many times in my life by my own judgments and assumptions when I encounter somebody who's quite different from me to immediately in my mind have all kinds of conclusions about them or assumptions based on their appearance or their accent or their whatever it might be, right? And then later I've discovered that as I get to know that person, I just adore them. I love them completely. And the differences that make them unique, rather than putting me off, are actually part and parcel of what I love about them. Have you ever had that experience? And so, I think that it's possible on some level, if we actually knew what was going on inside of people's lives, that we would feel a measure of openness to anybody. I know that's really broad, but we never have that experience where we know everything about what their life is or their torments are from the inside, only from the outside. So to approve of someone is to give caring, to give interest, to respect and honor the differences so that we can support them in a win-win, so that we can honor whatever limitations they have or believe they have, without shoving them up against them and saying, you know, that's just a belief system. Get your consciousness out of the whatever. Instead, we make space for them as they are. If we are going to include people, to actually include people, then we not only welcome them, we invite them, we open the circle, we respond to them, we engage with them, we participate, we listen. And in that way, we begin to learn more about their inside, and they begin to learn more about ours. And finally, we want to empower people, not just give them charity. When we empower people, we offer them tools if we have them, if they want them. We become mentors. We assist, we demonstrate, we observe, we correct, we encourage, and we celebrate with them when it comes through right. So we approve, we include, we empower in those ways that make space for people. And it takes us further, it takes us much further than just tolerating or understanding or giving charity. It really engages us at such a deep level. This is a group of people who are doing a bonding exercise that's a ropes course. How many of you have ever done a ropes course? Oh, lots of you. Okay. I was scared stiff. And we were doing a low one. It wasn't even up high like these guys are. We didn't need helmets and all that stuff. But when you have to stand on a rope across from a person who's pretty far away, who is also on a rope, and you have to lean in so far that you would lose your balance if not for that other person, and they have to do the same, and then you have to move along the rope together. I would tell you, my antiperspirant was not working after that. It's a challenge. Well, that's what life is, though. That's what life is. If we're engaged in life, we're leaning into each other. We're seeing that presence of divinity within us and within the other person, even in our fear, even in our apparent flaws or our supposed limitations. We're making space. Occasionally, one of us will slip or lose our grip or fall. Generally speaking, we don't just lay there on the ground, we get back up again. And so we get back into life. We get engaged again. We all need to belong, and that's the way that we do it. And so the way that we do this in Science of Mind, our practice, is moving from me and mine to us and ours. This is simply the recognition that there's only one. So, really, what we put out and what returns to us goes out into the infinite, comes back from the infinite, and the only one doing the giving and receiving is the infinite, but showing up in all of the myriad of forms and realities that we're in. And so, if we move deeper into that reality, we begin to see ourselves reflected in everybody. It becomes about us and ours. How are we going to live it that higher way? You know, my background training was in theater, and one of the things that you learn as an actor is to behave on stage when you're playing a role as if that is who you are. And so in order to do that, you have to do some research into that character. What else is available about that person in the play? Or the historical period, or what they're likely to have experienced or thought or felt. And if none of that is in the play, you have to make up a whole background story for them. Where do they come from? How do they get to be the way they are? And the other thing that's extremely important is you can't judge the character. So if you're playing the villain in the piece, you have to be on that villain's side on the inside when you're playing that part. Otherwise, you're just telegraphing villainness. You're not really being a person. And so you have to set aside your judgment about the character and find a way in which you can imagine that for this character, that behavior makes sense. And you have to do it as if it's the first time every time. And so when we pray for other people in Science of Mind, we have to set aside judgment about how it's showing up and judgment about how we think it should be in order to do the real prayer. We're not praying to God to do something for us, to them, or about them. We are praying for the vision of the infinite to come alive in us so that we perceive the deepest spiritual truth of that being, regardless of the appearance or the circumstances or what they think of themselves, to tune into the spiritual truth of who they are underneath all of that, and to pray ourselves into that place of acceptance and knowing of that core of that being, as if we are praying from God's knowingness, declaring the truth about them. That's a lot different from asking God to fix somebody, or would they finally get it, or wake this person up, would you? Or get this boss off my back. It's a very different kind of prayer. And sometimes we can't do that very well in our own lives. So we go to our practitioners or our prayer partners and we say, I'm off in the weeds, I'm stuck. This is driving me crazy and I'm feeling really upset about it, and I need to find a different way around this. Help me find the spiritual truth of this, because I can't get my feet there. I can't get my hands on it right now. That's what our prayer for others is, because we want to create a world that works for everyone. That thing that Frank read at the beginning from Centers for Spiritual Living, the global vision we hold together, it's a big vision. And it is a vision of the spiritual truth underneath what's all already showing up. The deeper truth is that which has been spoken there in that global vision is the spiritual truth behind all of these appearances. And what we want to do is live into that so fully that it cannot help but be a contagious vision of the truth that lifts all of us up into that reality, that spiritual reality. This man is Henri Nouwen. He was a priest, a Catholic priest, and a brilliant theologian. And he said, prayer and action can never be seen as contradictory or mutually exclusive. Prayer without action grows into powerless piety. And action without prayer denigrates into questionable manipulation. Now, sometimes I think the way that we traditionally do prayer is manipulation too, but that's a different story. This is what he's saying, that we can't just mouth the words. We have to also choose our actions differently. Bodhi's song this morning about, I can choose. Not only can we choose, we must choose. Not only can we choose, we can't not choose. We're always choosing. We're always choosing. But sometimes it's so ingrained in our habit that it becomes like that insidious evil creeping in, that we just have a kind of a snarky habit that expands as we practice it until its tentacles get into the way we think and the way we live and the way we behave. Don Miguel Ruiz said in his book, The Fifth Agreement, people will come to you and tell you their personal story, what they believe is truth. But you won't judge if it's truth or if it's not truth. You don't have any judgment, but you do have respect. You listen to the way other people express their symbols, knowing that whatever they say is distorted by their beliefs. You know that what they're telling you is nothing but a story. And you know that because you can feel it, you just know. But you also know when their words come from truth. And you will know that without words. And that's the main point. And finally, our founder, Ernest Holmes, said, I believe that everything that exists is an expression of God. And that's why we're here. There is an inner something in us that belongs to the universe. And we have to get rid of all that inhibits it. Every sense of rejection and guilt and insecurity and anxiety. We belong to God. All of us. Namaste. Now before we go into the offering, and I'm going to invite the ushers to come forward, I want to just take a moment to anchor that. So if you will, just close your eyes for a moment with me and put your hands over your heart, and let's know together that the vibration of life within us is a vibration that is sound and safe and whole and all-inclusive, and we are secure in the knowing that the truth of acceptance, of empowerment and inclusion includes us and all, right here and right now. And so it is. All right. So I want to say thank you to everybody who made this morning what it is and what it was. If you were involved in any way this morning, if you did the altar, thank you, Frost family. If you did the music, guys, wherever you are all now, and anybody else that participated in making this morning amazing, because you're everywhere, please stand up. We want to acknowledge all of you right now. Stand up, stand up. And I do want to say that one of these is not quite right. So the hospitality team, Paula's here, not Ellen, and Corrine and Marta are not here, and Suzanne was here. So that's not quite right, but you get the general idea. I meant well.